Here at Just Ride Bikes, I have reviewed dozens of gravel bikes over the last few years, and it's fair to say there's lots and lots of choice out there, which makes choosing a new one very tricky indeed. So in today's video, I've shared some of the best gravel bikes of 2024, which I highly recommend, with the full reviews and links to the reviews down below. So let's dive in with a brand new Canyon Grail. I've come to Mid-Wales today to put a bike through its paces and see how it performs. So let's dive in and take a closer look. The biggest departure from the old Grail launched back in 2018 is this, a brand new handlebar. Yes, the old double-decker hover handlebar has gone. And the reason it's gone is purely aerodynamics. They wanted to create a bike that's faster and more aero for the top pros they are sponsoring and for winning races like Unbound. And simply put, that old double-decker handlebar wasn't that aero compared to a more conventional handlebar that we have here. But this is no normal handlebar. Oh no, there are some interesting features that really stand out from other gravel bikes I have reviewed over the last few years. Firstly is a shape, what they call double drop. So we have a 5-degree back sweep on the tops and then a double flare in the drops. So 5-degree at the hoods and then 16 degrees at the drops to create a nicer, more ergonomic shape. And then we have what they are calling the gear groove, this bit on the middle of the handlebar, where you can fit accessories like a computer mount, which I have here, GoPro for lights, or a phone mount, or even some time trial extensions for doing really fast, flat out aero gravel racing. And it is an interesting solution to a problem with carbon handlebars like this when it comes to fitting accessories. And it would be cool to see some third-party accessory companies using the gear groove to add even more scope for fitting accessories onto the handlebar. This new Grail does look very, very similar to the ultimate road bike, doesn't it? And that is intentional. They've drawn heavily on the frame shapes and the aero performance of that platform for this new bike. And the bigger carryover feature is a D-profile seat post and seat tube. The seat post, while it looks the same as the one on the Ultimate, is actually different. Because the focus of the new bike is aerodynamics and speed and weight, this new seat post offers almost the comfort of the VCLS split seat post, but in a lighter and more aero package. Tyre clearance on the new bike is the same as the old bike at 42mm, with all bikes specking 40mm wide tyres as I have here. And you can fit mud guards, there are fender mounts on the frame and fork, and I have some mud guards at home which I will put on the bike as well. So you can put the mud guards around a 42mm wide tyres, which is really cool. Now, the reason it maxed out at 42 and isn't 45 or 50 is partly to not step on the toes of the Grizzle, which does have bigger tyre clearance, but it's also to keep the pros happy. So this bike, you can fit a double chain set with a 52-36 road chain set, which the pros are using in their fast gravel races and still have all the necessary clearance around there. And that's why the tyre clearance isn't more generous. I'd happily see a 45mm tyre on this bike for the riding I do, for a bit more comfort and no real compromise in speed. Right, that's enough griping about tyre sizes for a minute. Let me show you some other cool features that I do approve of on this new bike. And the first one is this bag here, an optional bag they've designed for the bike. There's no Velcro straps to scratch your paint or rub your knees, and there's loads of space inside for all your snacks. Got a little flapjack bar in there, some arm warmers, and it's waterproof. I've jet washed it. I know I shouldn't jet wash a bike, but it's been just fine, so I had to test it, you know. And then the cool trick on this, watch this guys, pull this little strap here, see that? Pull that, and it releases in a second. No Velcro, just leave that at home if you want, or put it on like that. And it uses the Fidlock system of 3 kind of little stubby mounts here, which you can take out if you want. I'll show you. And in their place you can put a rubber bung or put it back in there. And you've got this bag here. That is really cool, and I love how they've painted the bike to have that kind of silhouette as well, so it looks really, really cool. That's a nice feature. Hopefully this is something we might see available on other bikes. I'd happily have this on other bikes which don't have Canyon on a down tube. And another detail, There's a small hole there, so if you want to have a charging cable going to your computer or light from a battery in here, you can do that as well. So I put it to one side for a minute to show you another cool feature on this bike. Now, you might remember my review of the Endurace road bike with the top tube storage. Well, now we have down tube storage on this bike in the down tube because there's more space for more parts. So we have a small flap here, and underneath the flap is a carbon fiber pump and a multi-tool. And inside here, if I pull this strap and do a little magic trick for you, we have this bag, and inside is a plastic inner tube, gas canister, tyre levers and other bits and bobs. I don't think the bike comes with the inner tube and a pump. I'll have to check. I'll leave a comment down below. But I do like this move to internal frame storage on gravel bikes. It makes a lot of sense whether you're racing or just riding bikes for fun, and it's better than having everything hanging from your saddle or in your jersey pockets. So really cool. And I've done a ride today and it hasn't rattled, not had any downsides to it so far, but long-term durability is probably still a question mark, but hopefully it's as good as it has been over the last few weeks. The new Grail comes in 3 flavours. There's a CF SL starting at just over £2,500 here in the UK. I'll put all prices for all regions down below in the description. There's a CF SLX in the middle, and for the first time on the Grail platform is a CFR version, which I have here. And CFR is their name for the best of the best carbon fibre. They use it on the Air Road and the Ultimate, and also the Endurace I had on review a few weeks ago, but now the Grail gets the same treatment. And what that CFR frame means is a lower weight and extra stiffness over the CF SLX. They're claiming the frame is over 100 grams lighter and stiffer around the fork, head tube and bottom bracket. So more performance and lower weight. So this is a top of the range CFR model with SRAM red ETAP axis, Explore gearing, hydraulic disc brakes, a power meter, and then some lovely lightweight carbon wheels from DT Swiss with their high quality 180 hubs, the best they make, and topped off with a pair of Schwalbe G1 RS tyres and a 40mm width, which are a semi-slick tread pattern, probably fine if you ride somewhere dry and dusty like Colorado, but not so good if it's somewhere muddy like it is here in the UK most of the year round. So this entire bike, size medium, without pedals, weighs 7.7 kilos on my scales, which is pretty good, I think, for a bike like this. It's also worth mentioning the paint job on the bike. I love the half and half split paint finish and the bronze, which really sparkles in the sunlight. So fair play to Canyon, really nice paint job. I am impressed. Right, to put a new bike through its paces, I come to mid-Wales to find some gravel paradise, and Matt Page, organiser of Gritfest, I'll put a link to that down below, go show me some sweet gravel. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're heading around Cruachan Forest, so right in the middle of mid-Wales pretty much, and it's just a huge network of trails, so yeah, showing Dave around.
And the sun's come out finally. Let's see how it's done.
Promise you it gets easier.
Straight in at the deep end with a massive gut busting climb. Could do some easier gears, but Matt is nailing it. For sale, needs a bit of work, has potential, I say. Got the house there, massive YouTube studio there, and bike shed, and a small outbuilding there. An actual tank in the woods. Not something you see that often.
No one about.
Nobody will actually steal it. I bet he's got loads of traction from those tracks. A bit more than I have from my tyres, that's for sure. How slick they are. So yesterday I rode with Matt Page in the stunning forest over near Cannondale, and today I'm in the Brecons for a really rugged, hardcore ride. So a really good test for the new bike. And so far, doing a really good job. I can't blame the bike so far. Anyway, onwards and upwards. The bike flies! It really flies! They built a rocket ship so fast! It's right up there, the Video Rave SLR, the 3T Explorer Race Max, and I have a super rapid, flat out fast gravel bikes I've tested over the last few years. Those pros that Canyon sponsor will be very, very happy indeed. Now, clearly some of that speed is down to tyres on the bike. On the road, they are damn quick after we approach another climb. And on smooth gravel, they're really good too. And even the mud, actually, not so bad. I managed to get up some quite tricky climbs, and they're okay. But probably not a tyre I expect if I was riding this bike long term. So this new handlebar, well, it's a big improvement. Much more conventional. I like the shape. The shape works really well for me. We've got a bit of sweep back from the stem, and that and the grippy bar tape gives a really nice position on the tops. So we cruise along, enjoying the view like I am now. It feels really, really nice. Flared drop shape works nicely. You got like 2 or 3 different hand positions. On the descents, you got that extra flare for a bit more control. And then the hood's angled over just a little bit, but not too much. So ergonomically, it's a really nice handlebar. The only downside, as with all one-piece carbon handlebars, is you can't customize the stem length when you buy the bike. That's something that Canyon really need to offer. I don't mind the stem length and bar width, it works for me, but that is a factor to consider. Handlebar aside, it still feels very similar to the old Grail, and the fit is largely the same. My position on the hoods and the reach and stack all feels very similar, which is a good thing because the Grail was a nice bike to ride, but the new handlebar just makes it just a bit easier to get your head around visually and ergonomically as well. And while it's clearly fast, it's also pretty smooth as well. It does a good job of smoothing off the rougher edges from big impacts and gives you a relatively smooth ride. I mean, it's not plush and really compliant like a bigger tyre gravel bike like the Grizzle or some other bikes in that space. But the new C-Post is doing a good job of giving me a fairly smooth ride in the saddle so I don't feel beaten up. And the front end is pretty good actually. The handlebar and the fork must be doing some work to just take off the edge from big impacts so it's not quite jarring or harsh. Since I'm riding a German bike, I've got some German snacks for my mid-ride stop. No idea what they are, but let's dive in and have a look. Here we go. Oh, they're like wine gums. Quite tasty actually, fruity. Probably not the healthiest snack in the world, but nice. Keep me going. Keep me powering the pedals. Okay, let me share some likes and dislikes. And it's only based on 2 weeks of riding, so not a super long-term review, but a really strong, good first impression. And I like the speed and the handling of the bike. I love the new handlebar. I think it's a real success over the old double-decker handlebar. But I do have concerns around the gear groove because the double-decker handlebar lasted 5 years. Will this be a thing that Canyon supports long-term, or will it disappear with the next update of the Grail in the next 3, 4, 5 years? Who knows? And it'd be good to see more third-party accessories for it. So potentially a really cool feature, but it's a bit of a long-term question mark. There's still the same issue of not being able to specify the handlebar dimensions you want, so that's a bit of a factor as well. I love the fact we had down tube storage and a really cool bag that you can remove in seconds and looks really flush and clean And that's something I like to see more bike manufacturers and bag manufacturers do as well. I love the fact we have mudguard mounts as well, or fender mounts if you're watching in the US. Makes it a really versatile bike. The only drawback for me personally is limiting the tyre clearance to a 42 max. And while clearance at the front looks a bit more generous, out back it looks really tight even with a 40. But personally, I'd love to see this bike take a 45mm wide tyre, because I think it's a really good option whether you're racing or riding fast. And I know lots of people might find a bike ticks all the boxes they're looking for in a bike, but the tyre clearance might be the one thing that holds them back and push you onto the grizzle, which is a totally different platform. For those people searching for a quiver killer, an N+1 killer, one bike that can do it all, this bike definitely kind of has that going for it. These tyres are fast on the road, fit some mud guards, a good winter bike. So a bike that could be an interesting choice. So I might do some testing in the future if I can hold onto the bike, do some different configurations with the build and see how versatile it really is. See where it's more widely appealing than just a pro race gravel bike, which it's clearly been designed for. This is a new Cervelo Aspero gravel bike, and it's a lot like the original that launched way back in 2019, but the company says it's faster, smoother and more versatile. And today we'll find out if it's any good or not. I've been riding it for the last few weeks on my local trails here in the Cotswolds, so we'll talk about ride quality, performance and handling. We'll also see what it weighs on my scales, what it costs you to buy this bike, and go through the upgrades on the old bike. So I'm David, you're watching Just Ride Bikes. Let's dive in. Let's start this video by looking at the design of the bike and some of the changes and improvements. And visually, right off the bat, it does look very similar, almost identical to the old bike. Similar tube profiles and a similar silhouette. So the top tube is now more sloped than before to increase the standover height, and that's a good thing when you're throwing the bike around in the woods and on single track trails. Out back we have a few changes. So the seat stays are still dropped as before for extra compliance in the saddle, but the chain stays are dropped even more, and the seat tube, as you can see here, is curved to increase the tyre clearance at the back of the bike. So tyre clearance on the new model goes up from 40mm on a 700cc wheel to 42, so not a massive change, but the company does say there's up to 7.4mm of clearance between the rubber and the frame to allow extra mud clearance for the bike. So I reckon you can go up to 45 probably quite easily. I haven't tried that yet though, and it will depend on the actual tyre and rim combination. But as you can see, there's plenty of clearance around these 40mm wide tyres that come fitted as standard. A detail that carries over from the old bike is the flip chip in the fork dropout here. We've seen flip chips on forks and rear dropouts on other bikes like the FiftyOne Assassin, the Giant Revolt, the Rondo, GT Grade and many others. And the idea is to maintain or adjust the fork trail depending on the wheels and tyres you run on the bike. So right now we're a 40mm wide tyre. The fork trail is about 62mm, which is quite long, designed to give a nice stable planted sort of handling balance so it's easy to ride at high speed over rough terrain. And if you do swap to a smaller wheel set, the trail will be maintained. It also means if you go down to a smaller tyre, you can modify that fork trail to suit your requirements as well. Now I haven't tried adjusting the fork trail on the bike because I don't think 650B is as popular as it was 4 or 5 years ago. I was mostly riding a bike as it came, as it sold, as most of you will buy the bike seen right here. But it's nice to have that option if you do want it, and if you don't, it doesn't look that bad, there's no extra weight and no real penalty to having it. It's probably worth me doing a video separately on 700 versus 650B and the pros and cons of each, and whether the smaller wheel size is still relevant in 2024, because I don't feel it's as relevant as it used to be given the advances in bigger 700cc tyres. Let me know your thoughts by leaving a comment down below. Meanwhile, at the back of the frame we now have SRAM UDH dropouts. This is a new standard becoming very popular on many modern gravel bikes, and it means you can easily replace the mech hanger if it breaks or bends because of one single standard. and it means the frame is now compatible with SRAM's T-type transmissions like the Eagle mullet setup, which is very popular on gravel bikes, or anything new coming from SRAM down the line. And interesting to see how many companies are now embracing this standard and what Shimano will do in response to SRAM's fairly major play in reconfiguring, redefining dropouts on frames like this. To improve smoothness, they've actually decreased the stiffness at the head tube to give a bit more front end compliance. And out back, we still have a round 27.2mm seat post with an external seat clamp, and I personally love this detail. Yes, internal wedge clamp systems are cleaner, but can be fiddly to set up, and you can't beat the easy setup of an external seat clamp. And the carbon fibre seat post on this model will definitely help comfort in the saddle. The other big change on the new Aspero is full internal routing. On the old bike, the cables and hoses went inside a frame about here. Now they go inside the steering tube, with the steering tube a D-shaped item. The routing system is the same on the other bikes like the Soloist, and it's actually compatible with those bikes as well. On this model, we have a two-piece setup, but you can, if you want, go to a one-piece setup and have that brake hose inside the handlebar and stem. So options to customize the bike as you want. The down tube is also a bit slimmer as well, which leads to a new threaded bottom bracket using a T47A. Now, Cervelo have a history of doing bottom brackets a bit differently to most other manufacturers. And while on one hand it's great they have adopted that oversized threaded bottom bracket, they've done it a bit differently. So we have an external cup on the driver side and an internal cup on the non-driver side. So you get the benefits of a T47 setup, but the downside is you can't buy an off-the-shelf T47 bottom bracket. You have to buy one that's compatible with a Cervelo, but should hopefully eliminate any issues with fitting and creaking that has plagued press fit in the past. This is definitely not a super versatile bike packing setup. We do have bolts on the top tube for a bento bag, and a third bottle cage on the down tube where we find a neat bash guard to protect the carbon frame from rock strikes. But there aren't any mounts on the fork, and there's definitely no fender or mud guard mount, so not the super versatile option that other gravel bikes definitely are. So what will this new Aspero cost you to buy? Well, the range is priced from £3,000 with a Shimano GRX group set, and there are loads of options with Shimano and SRAM all the way up to this range top model, which will set you back £5,200 with a SRAM Revolt X group set. And then we have the company's own carbon fibre reserve wheels. We then have WTB Volpine tyres in a 40mm width, and we'll talk about those in the ride section in a few moments. Other details worth noting is a flared carbon fibre aero handlebar and a carbon fibre seat post and a Pro logo saddle. So it is well equipped for the money. There are cheaper bikes offering a similar specification from the likes of Canyon and Giant with the same sort of group set and configuration. So not crazy price, but definitely not the best value option in the market right now. Right, last detail before we go for a spin to see how much it weighs. So size 56, I've removed the pedals. We have a computer mount and bottle cage on there. And on the scales, drum roll please, 8.5 kilos, and in pounds 18.14. So not a crazy light build, but not crazy heavy either, and 8.5 kilos, a par for the course for a bike with a SRAM rival specification. But is weight everything? Well, let's hit the trail and find out. Right, okay, let's see what this bike is like to ride. I've actually been testing it for several weeks now on my local trails, both dry and dusty and wet and muddy as it is today. So a real range of conditions, and the one thing that's clear from riding this bike for the very first time is just how damn quick it is. So I have a test loop which I ride these bikes on using power meter to write the same power, and it's right up there with the new Canyon Grail, the Scott Addict Gravel, and a 3T in its various incarnations like the Race Max as well. So definitely a quick bike, delivers the same speed that the original delivered way back in 2019. The bike just has a sense of speed that not all bikes possess in my experience. The geometry, the weight, the stiffness, the frame stiffness, especially when you're climbing, when you're really putting the power down on a climb, the bike just feels amazing. It really does feel fantastic when it comes to power transfer. The geometry is largely the same as the old bike and very similar to a Canyon Grail, but compared to a Canyon, the stack is lower and the reach a bit shorter, and we have quite a long top tube designed around a short stem, so it gives a good kind of fit on the bike and good handling as well. The fit does feel similar to a road bike, like an endurance road bike. And if you're coming from a road bike and you want that sort of fit, then the bike will feel right for you. It does feel like a fat tire road bike in many situations. The geometry, as I said, is very similar to the old bike, and it still works. There's nothing crazy in the numbers and the angles of this size 56 I'm riding, but it still delivers very good handling on a range of trails and different conditions. The steering is on the slow side, not lazy, but kind of calm and easy to control when you ride through mud and over hard packed trails at high speed, but it's still nimble enough that you can change direction easily when a trail demands it. The wheelbase and chainstays are a bit longer, so perhaps a smidgen more stable than the old bike. Still have quite a high bottom bracket, so still a bike that delivers that good performance on the road, on the gravel, on a range of trail conditions. The tyres on this bike definitely encourage the speed as well. The Volpine is a closely packed tread pattern, very good when it's dry, not so good when it's muddy, and if you are encountering a muddy, rooty little climb, you do have to be very careful with power and weight balance to not spin out and lose traction and come to a standstill. So a great tyre if you are riding on hard packed trails, which are a rare thing in the UK at this time of year, but a good option for the speed credentials of this Aspero. I do wish the bike had a bit more tyre clearance, and I might have to try a 45 just to see if it fits and how much clearance there is. But I get the bike is designed for high speed applications, racing, and a narrow tyre in dry conditions. Probably it's all you need. So that is the trouble with testing gravel bikes and companies speccing tyres on these bikes, that tyre choice does vary so much around the world. The riding I'm doing is very different to riding Ben Delaney is doing in Colorado. You don't have mud to contend with like I do, and rocks and roots. And as nice as the bike rides, it does take me back, well, 5 years now to when the Aspero first launched, and does remind me of that bike. And that is a bike I enjoyed riding and testing a lot. And Cervelo told me in the year since it's still been a popular bike for the company. But we've seen the gravel space explode with choice and bikes becoming ever more evolved and advanced in terms of geometry and other features. So the updates here, while useful and nice, and do maintain everything that was great about the original Aspero, I don't think really move it forward enough to contend with some of the more exciting options in the market right now. So a great bike, yes, and I like the way they continue the design of the bike, but I think there are bikes that are perhaps a bit more enticing in terms of features and other design aspects of the bikes and tyre clearance and comfort as well. So an interesting dilemma in whether Cervelo has done enough to keep the Aspero current, or whether they haven't been brave and bold enough to really move it forward to keep pace where gravel is going, because gravel is definitely evolving, definitely moving. There's more space for development, for new ideas, and it does come down to what you want from your gravel bike, the riding you are doing. This might well be enough, and you might think the changes are enough, but you might think the bike is still lagging behind other options in the market right now. So an interesting debate. I guess ultimately you will decide whether the bike is right, whether the changes are enough. I think the bike is definitely a good bike. It still has all the hallmarks of the original, but just tweaked and improved in key places. It's also not the smoothest riding bike. They say it's smoother than the old bike, but I'm not sure I can tell that from riding this bike without the old bike alongside for comparison. And it's definitely a firmer riding gravel bike. It's not as smooth as the Canyon Grail or a Giant Revolt or a Cannondale Topstone or a GT Grade. The carbon seat post definitely helps, but yeah, not the comfiest, plushest riding bike. But I don't think if you're racing, if you're riding at speed, then comfort is probably not right at the top of your list. So should you buy the new Cervelo Aspero or avoid it? Well, just like the original launched all those years ago, this is still a high performance, high speed option. But I don't think the changes are enough to warrant upgrading from the old model if you currently own that. And there are more exciting options in the market right now, like the Canyon Grail, for example, with its frame storage and sleek bag solution. And if you want more comfort, more versatility and bigger tyre clearance, then a Giant Revolt and a Trek Checkpoint are probably better options. But all that said, I do think the new Cervelo Aspero will suit and match the riding and racing a lot of people are doing these days, with a big focus on speed and performance. And this is the Ventum GS1, and it might just be the best value gravel bike you can buy in 2024. And I say that because we have a full carbon fibre frame and fork, SRAM's most affordable electronic group set, and some decent wheels, tyres and finishing parts, and this bike here retails for $3,000. To put that price into perspective, both Giant and Canyon offer similar carbon fibre gravel bikes, but equipped with Shimano GRX mechanical shifting group sets. So a lot of bike for the money. But how does it ride? Is it actually any good and worth spending your hard-earned money on? Well, in a few minutes we'll go for a spin, go for a ride and see how it actually performs. But first, before that, let me give you a quick tour of the bike and some of the standout features. So let's dive in. The reason Ventum can offer that great value for money is because they sell direct, a bit like Canyon. They have no dealers or shops. You buy direct through their website and the bike is delivered to your home in a box, passing a discount on to the customer. But the downside to that approach is you can't go to your local bike shop and take the bike for a spin around a car park. But many people are very happy buying bikes and other products online without seeing them in the flesh or even riding them. And that's where reviews like this come in handy. And it's my job to try and inform you whether this is the right bike for you or not. And you can help support my reviews here at Just Ride Bikes by hitting that subscribe button down below. So I'm looking at this bike, and firstly, well, I love the colour. A brand new colour for the Ventum GS1. And the bike has all the hallmarks of a modern gravel bike. And it's one clearly designed for speed and racing. We have semi-internal cable routing up front, an aero down tube with dropped rear stays, and the chainstays are dropped as well to maximise tyre clearance, which on this bike is 48mm, which is pretty good. It's more than the Canyon Grail, but a bit less than the Giant Revolt, so plenty of tyre clearance for most people. The bike can take a front mech. We have a blanking plate on the seat tube if you don't want a 1x and you prefer a 2x. The shame that bit isn't colour matched to the rest of the frame. That's a bit of an oversight, I think, but given the price, maybe it's one we can overlook. And backing up the fact that this is clearly a bike designed for speed and racing, there aren't a full suite of bike packing mounts. We do have the bento box top tube mounts and an extra bottle cage on the underside of the down tube, but there aren't sadly any extra mounts on the fork blades for fitting extra cages for bottles and bags. And there aren't even any mudguard or fender mounts, which is a real shame. So not the most versatile gravel bike, definitely one aimed at those people who want a stripped back, speed, race focused setup. Two other details I really like include the T47 bottom bracket, and then we have a SRAM UDH compatible dropout. So the frame is future proofed just in case SRAM or even perhaps Shimano have anything exciting planned for their new gravel bike group sets in the future. The other key feature detail on a bike worth pointing out is the fork dropout. and there we have a adjustable flip chip, so you can adjust the fork, rake, and therefore the trail of the bike between 45 and 50 millimeters, and that impacts the steering of the bike. So you can either have it faster steering or slower steering to tune the bike to the riding style you like and the terrain you are riding on. Okay, hello viewers, you join me about halfway around my test loop today. It's a lovely day in the forest, the sun is out, but it's still wet as anything, and I found loads of mud, as you can probably tell. And something I forgot to mention earlier is that I'm riding a size ML, and this bike with no pedals weighs 8.6 kilos on my scales, which I think is pretty good for the price point and the equipment on the bike. Certainly no featherweight, but it's not heavy, and a pretty good weight compared to some bikes I've tested in the past that cost a lot more money. And you can certainly make the bike a lot lighter with a few upgrades of course, but based on the climbing I've done so far, the weight really isn't a big factor at all. I'm not going to lie, it doesn't go uphill quite as nicely in my Crux, but that costs a lot more money. The whole frame costs more than this entire bike, so it's worth bearing that in mind. And riding this bike, I'm reminded of the Cervelo Aspero and the Canyon Grail to an extent. It feels very racy, it wants to go fast, as cliched as that sounds. Clearly plenty of stiffness from the frame and the fork, and despite that weight, it really gets along in a decent hurry. Sprints out the corners very well, good power transfer. It's a very racy feeling bike, definitely a bike for those of you who want to go fast, want to cover ground as quickly as possible, whether racing or just riding for fun. So the speed box is definitely very firmly ticked indeed. It displays similar handling to the Grail and Aspero as well. The geometry is kind of middle of the road, neither too progressive and slack or conservative and steep and upright. So numbers give a good balance, good handling traits on a range of trails, gravel tracks, single track, and the road as well. So an easy bike to jump on and feel right at home on. There's pretty good damping from the tyres and the bike from some of the rougher, rockier trails I've been riding today. It's not the harshest riding bike, it's definitely smoother than that Focus Atlas I rode a few weeks ago. And it's similar to a Canyon Grail and the Cervelo Aspero. Not as smooth as a Giant Defy or a Specialized Diverge, but it does sit somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. And testing comfort, compliance on a gravel bike is such a tricky job. I'm using all my years of experience here, riding familiar trails, swapping the wheels and tyres around. But I'd say comfort is pretty good. It could be better though. There isn't a lot of exposed seat posts from the frame with a horizontal top tube, and you can't fit a suspension seat post because of the deep profile, but you could fit a suspension stem, but I don't really think it needs it for smooth gravel I'm riding right now. There you go, baby wild boar, native to Forest of Dean, but it's something you rarely see. What a treat. Okay, let's see how the bike copes with some single track and mountain bike trails. Nothing too technical, but nice to get off the wider gravel tracks onto something a bit more twisty and turny and fun. And the bike is coping really nicely. The geometry numbers of the bike strike a good balance. It's neither the most conservative nor the most progressive in the gravel category, but strikes a happy medium, and it's given me plenty of steering agility through the corners. We've got a nice stretch to the hoods despite a very short stem. Could go longer if you need, but the short stem keeps the steering light and fairly quick. Okay, for the next part of the test, let's see how it copes with roads, tarmac, pavement, whatever you want to call it. And straight away it feels like a nice road race bike, really. These WTB Volpine tyres roll very quickly indeed on tarmac, no noise, seemingly no resistance really. I mean, there is some, but they don't feel draggy. And get nice and aero on the bike. It feels good. So yes, it does road very well indeed. Can firmly tick that box on this test. Right, onto something a little bit juicier, spicier, and a bit more fun. Something spicy, okay? It's slippery as heck. One of the reasons I reckon this is a great value bike for 2024 is the fact you are getting electronic shifting at this price point where bigger brands only offer mechanical shifting. Now, we could argue all day long about the pros and cons of electronic versus mechanical shifting, and I'm sure you know which camp you're in. But there's no denying electronic shifting is lovely to use. So easy, press a button, the mirror touch, and you change gear. And when you're riding off-road, you'll be riding all day, you're bike packing, that ease of shifting is very nice indeed. And there's no cables to wear out or snap. Maintenance, in my experience with SRAM Access, is very, very good indeed. And the range of gears from this one by setup has been adequate for the riding I have available to me. Getting up the hills okay, bobbing down the other side just fine. The hood's the same as Force and Rival, so small, compact, ergonomic, and the brakes are very, very powerful indeed. This is the beauty of gravel bikes. From the road to the gravel tracks to the forest single track, all on the same bike, all on the same ride. A big smile plastered across my face. No close passes here for motorists. Love it, absolutely love it. And the sun is shining, what a day. Good ride that, despite it being just a bit muddy, as you can probably tell, what I would give for some dry, dusty trails right now. But let me give you some likes, dislikes, and a verdict in a few moments. I'll start with the bad stuff, and really, to be honest, there isn't much bad about the bike at all. More small kind of things I would change if I could. Firstly, I would love a slightly wider tyre. 40 good, but I think 45 would be better for the bike and the person it's aimed at. Trade in some speed and weight for more comfort, which a bike does lack a little bit. Talking of comfort, while I love the near horizontal top tube, it does limit how much seat post you have exposed outside of the frame, and that in turn limits how much the saddle and seat post can flex back and forth, and does limit the amount of comfort at the saddle compared to other bikes with a more sloping top tube. So a more sloping top tube will give more seat post and give more comfort. The other small gripe is the fact we have a D-shaped aero seat post, which on a race bike is fine, but on a bike of this price does limit your option to fit either a dropper seat post for more gnarly terrain, or a suspension flexi seat post like a Redshift, a Cane Creek, or the Canyon VCLS, or the Ergon one as well. Because for what I see as a potential target customer for a bike, a bit more comfort would be a nice thing. But if you are a privateer racer, if such a thing exists anymore, and you want a bike that can be fast and racy, but on a budget, then, well, aero it is. And then the biggest miss for me is a lack of mudguard or fender mounts, which limits the versatility of the bike compared to other bikes in the category, especially when we have such generous tyre clearance. You could easily fit a mudguard around these tyres or change the wheels and tyres for a road bike setup. So a few small kind of gripes rather than any major issues to speak of. And then likes, well, the way it rides, the handling, the speed, all those attributes are very good. And then the option to adjust the fork rake and therefore the trail is nice to have. Probably a bit overkill for some people, but no, not a bad thing at all. You can leave it as it is and it's just fine. I do like the nice tidy cable routing around the handlebar and stem, which are two-piece, so you can change the stem for a longer one, a different handlebar if you need. And then I love the fact you are getting branded components, WTB for wheels, tyres and saddle, and FSA for the bar and stem. And I have to say, I love the fact you are getting an electronic group set on a bike of this price, where bigger manufacturers can only offer a mechanical group set. It works really well, the same as Rival, Force and Red in terms of functionality. Blindfolded, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. The same battery technology, all the gear range you need. There's a clutch mechanism in there to stop the chain bouncing around. It works extremely well. And to get that group set and technology on a bike of this price is pretty astonishing, it has to be said. And if you are in the market for a new bike and you have a budget of about $3,000, well, I think the GS1 should be right at the top, if not the top of your shortlist in terms of the performance, the equipment, everything about the bike really shines very brightly indeed. This is a stunning FiftyOne Assassin, a carbon gravel adventure bike from Ireland that aims to be as versatile and capable as you want such a bike to be, whether racing or bike packing. And in this video, we are going to review it. I'll point out some cool features and details and some that really stand out in this very competitive market right now. We'll go for a ride and see how it performs and compares to other similar bikes, talk about the price, specification, weight and much more. Because I'm David and you're watching Just Ride Bikes. Let's dive in. Hands up if you've heard of FiftyOne. Some of you I'm sure had done. They are a Dublin based brand and have been around for a few years now and remade their name with custom carbon road bikes in terms of the construction, the geometry and the paint jobs of the bikes, and have made some absolutely stunning bikes over the years. But this new Assassin, their first gravel and adventure offering, is made in Taiwan using a more conventional frame manufacturing method. And this is no generic looking bike at all, very, very distinctive indeed. We have a big, muscular, angular, flat-sided fork out the front, a tall, deep head tube there, a sloping top tube, really skinny rear stays that aren't dropped and go right up to the top tube, and the swooping dropped chain stays for maximum tyre clearance. And tyre clearance is 47mm on a 650 or a 700 wheel size. So yes, you can run the big or small wheels depending on your personal preference. These, for reference, are 700C on a 45mm wide tyre. And then we come to the really interesting and unique feature of the bike, which really sets it apart from most other bikes in this category. Firstly, we have very progressive geometry, so it's long and slack compared to most road-focused gravel bikes, much more akin to that BMC ERS I reviewed a few years ago. And then we have adjustable geometry as well, with flip chips in both the rear dropout and the fork dropout as well. This idea isn't a new one. There's a GT grade, a Giant Revolt, but they either have it in the rear or the front, not both. This is the first time I've had a bike with adjustable geometry on the front and the rear. The flip chips and the fork adjust the trail of the bike, and I'll put a link to what trail is down in the description rather than spend a few minutes explaining it here if you aren't familiar with the term. What the trail does is affect how the bike steers and handles, and on the bike makes a big difference. And that trail figure is a lot longer than most other bikes. So on this bike, you can adjust it from 76 to 87. And for comparison, and put that number in some sort of context, a Specialized Diverge is 57, so much, much shorter. And a BMC ERS, which is a similar sort of bike in terms of geometry, is 77. So this bike can go much longer than even that BMC ERS. And the idea behind that adjustment is to allow the rider to tune the bike to the riding they are doing. So if you're riding extremely technical, rough terrain in the mountains perhaps, or going bike packing, they want a super stable, rock solid setup. That longer trail will just calm everything down and make it super easy to ride over any sort of terrain. And then the shorter setting makes it a bit more agile for a more playful, nimble setting. Let's talk price, and the frame set alone will cost you £3,000 with a choice of different colours and available in 4 sizes. And this bike here, I've been testing for the last few months, retails for £3,800, which seems a bit of a bargain. We get all the components and wheels and finishing kits for £800 more than a frame set on its own. So the bike I've got here has a Shimano GRX 1x11 speed mechanical group set with a mix of 800 and 600 components. So an 800 rear mech and then a 600 crankset and brake levers and brake calipers. And then DT Swiss 1800 wheels, WTB Riddler 45mm wide tyres. Up front, an Eaton flared drop handlebar and a zip stem seat post and a WTB saddle. This bike here, as you see it, size large, without pedals, but weighed with the bottom cages, is 9.2 kilograms on my scales, which is okay, it's not amazing. It's a light carbon frame, but the components aren't the lightest in the world, so you could certainly go lighter if you wanted. Okay, let's get off road, see what this bike is all about. And it feels so different to most other gravel bikes I've ridden over the past few years. It's almost docile and nonchalant in its handling, so laid back. Feels almost lazy at first, but once you get used to it, oh my goodness me, it's a good off-road. Now my riding starts with a few miles of tarmac and a bit of a climb, and here the bike felt kind of lazy really to start with and didn't feel very good if I'm honest with you. But as soon as I got off-road and as soon as I put it down my rocky descent, the bike came alive and the geometry all made a lot of sense, because when you're riding down a rocky trail, the geometry makes the bike so planted and so stable and so easy to carry a lot of speed compared to most kind of road biased gravel bikes. The front wheel isn't trying to take you out, it's not bouncing off rocks and roots, all while you're going absolutely flat out, rocks flying around behind you, leaving a dust cloud in your wake. It's just a ride to speed and capability. And I've mostly been riding the bike in the middle setting, the kind of intermediate setting, the best all-round compromise between that kind of extreme the bike offers, and it feels really good. I have experimented with the fork flip chip and it makes a big difference. It might be only a few millimeters on the actual fork itself, but on the trail it makes a substantial difference and you really notice it. That longer trail in the long setting gives you the most amazing handling, just so planted. You can almost close your eyes and the bike will just take care of things itself. It's that good. And even the shorter trail setting, it's so much calmer and rock solid than even a Specialized Diverge or a Crux or a Giant Revolt. So it's a lot more planted than most gravel bikes. And the BMC Urge is really the only bike I've tested that offers this kind of mountain bike inspired handling, geometry and steering balance. And that makes it fantastic if you are trying to ride the sketchier trails, the most demanding trails, really pushing the limits of these bikes, and you're going bike packing and you might encounter some big mountain descents or whatever it might be, because this bike will look after you. And especially important towards the end of a long ride when you're tired and fatigued and your mental focus isn't really where it should be. And last thing you want to do is be really battling a nervous and twitchy gravel bike. Well, this bike, like I say, you can close your eyes and it'll just do the riding for you. So planted. That really is the word that sums up this bike. Planted, solid, stable, steadfast. But it won't suit everybody. Although I do think if you're a roadie coming to gravel with no background in off-road riding or mountain bike experience, the geometry of this bike, while it feels very strange at first compared to most other gravel bikes and certainly a road bike, is a massive skills boost and a big skills compensator, because it makes riding rocky, challenging trails a lot easier than most gravel bikes. So while it might feel strange at first, once you get used to it, you'll find yourself riding trails you might never have imagined you get down in one piece before. A bit of a blemish is the smoothness of the bike isn't absolutely amazing. The front end is quite hard and there's quite a bit of feedback coming through the handlebars on certain trails when they're kind of rutted and it's dried out hard like it is now. But I can go to a wide tyre, I can run low tyre pressures, although I'm already on 25 front and 30 at the back. But I could fit a Redshift suspension stem because we have a normal handlebar stem set up, so that's a nice easy fix. And that skinny seat post is giving quite a good amount of comfort through my bum. And I think upgrade to a carbon seat post might even boost that even more, and you can fit an ergon seat post or a suspension seat post for even more comfort. So a bit of Redshift front and rear suspension on this bike, I think would make it the ultimate bike packing gravel adventure bike. If I go and bike packing for a week or doing one of these long distance gravel epics like the Tracker in Girona recently, this will be a good option. That geometry to look after you, you can adjust it to suit your preference. Lots of bags and bottle mounts as well. I think the bike that would be perfect for that sort of big distance epic adventure. So the Assassin is a really interesting take on the gravel adventure bike genre, and it will be fascinating to see how bikes do evolve over the next few years, whether more bike brands and people want a bike going in this sort of direction with a very progressive, long, slack geometry and that adjustability as well. I do fear that some people might find it too much complexity and too much choice, but if you are into tweaking and fiddling with the bikes yourself, you will like how the bike lets you kind of modify it and personalize it to your preference. So a really interesting bike, but let me share some likes and dislikes after riding the bike for the last few months. I love the fact the bike has loads of mounts for mud guards and extra bags and bottles, ideal for any bike packing adventure you might take the bike on. We've got a molded bash guard down there on the down tube to protect the carbon frame from rocks flying up from that front wheel. A really nice feature on this bike. We've got really sensible cable routing, internal, but you fit any group set, mechanical or electronic, with ports for all different options there. And small rubber plugs that keep the cables from rattling. I love the round 27.2mm seat post with an external seat clamp. Better than a fiddly internal clamp, and you can fit a dropper seat post as well. And if you have a Di2 group set, you put a battery in the down tube. We have a T47 threaded bottom bracket, which makes loads of sense on a bike like this for easy home maintenance. There isn't really much to dislike about the bike, but there are only 4 frame sizes, which might be limiting depending on where you fit on their size scale, if you fall between the cracks or 2 different sizes, or are too short or too tall for their size range. While tyre clearance on the bike is pretty generous, I think it could be even better. Space for 50 or wider would be nice to see for more options, to future-proof the bike and to give even more clearance, especially when riding in the mud. It would be nice to see a chainstay protector there just to protect the paint from that chain bouncing around. I've not had any problems so far because there's nothing dropped, but that would be a nice detail to match the bash guard on the down tube. So should you buy it? Well, it's definitely a bold bike with some really cool features and a very distinctive ride character that would definitely appeal to those people really trying to push these bikes to their limits or take on some big epic bike packing adventures where the handling and the adjustability of the bike will be a key factor and a benefit over more road focused gravel adventure bikes. This is a brand new Enve MOG, and I've just ridden and just about recovered from a 215 kilometer gravel event as a way to really put the bike through its paces and also find my own personal limits as well. So the MOG is the newest bike from the US company. In a very short amount of time, they've gone from a wheel and handlebar and fork brand to a bike brand. First with a custom road, then the Melee, and now the MOG. And what's really interesting and exciting about this bike in particular is while the whole gravel sector is growing fast and the bikes are now diverging into two distinct camps. At one end we have race bikes, then at the other we have your bike packing adventure bikes. But what the MOG is trying to do is be the best of both worlds. Clearly a bike designed for speed and racing with the aerodynamics, internal K-routing, but then on the other hand you can fit wide tyres, mud guards, extra mounts for bottles and bags as well. But can one bike really do it all, or is it compromised? In this video and at this event, I aim to ride it as fast as I could and retest the bike's performance for that kind of racing focused gravel rider. And in a future video, I'll hopefully do a bike packing version and retest the capability of this bike in that setting as well. But in this video, it's all about speed and suffering, lots and lots of suffering. So the MOG is clearly, as you can tell, designed for speed and going as fast as you can. And even with me powering the bike, it was a very fast bike indeed. The opening few miles of this event had the fast rolling Salisbury Plain gravel, kind of big US style gravel tracks, kind of going up and down, up and down. And I found myself fairly quickly in a group of 5 guys doing 40k an hour on gravel, going through and off. I was going much harder than I had planned to go in that stage of the ride, but I was having loads of fun despite the pain, and it was a good way to cover a lot of distance very quickly early on in the ride. And in that fast-paced situation, in a small group, moving quickly, the bike was fantastic. From the fast rolling tyres to the low front end, a really nice fit on the bike. I was getting really aero as well, and the aero benefits of the bike I could feel every time we came to a downhill when we were freewheeling. I was easily pulling away from the people I was riding with, so clear benefits there. And it just made riding at high speed easier than it would be on a sort of conventional gravel bike. So I was loving the speed of the bike and really enjoying, despite the pain and the suffering, being in a small group, really working hard and working well together. And then I had my one and only mechanical of the day, a drop chain. I'm running, as you can see, a Shimano GRX 1x electronic group set, 42 on the front and 1142 on the back. And it's a group set I know really well, very popular with many people indeed. But on one quite fast and quite rough descent, I was in the smallest sprocket at the back and the chain fell off the chainring at the front. And trying to reach down and put the chain back on the chainring when you're doing 40k an hour on a loose surface is very sketchy indeed. So I stopped, quickly put it back on, and then chased to get back on the group to save riding solo for the next few hours. So a bit of a blemish on my report card there. And just for you 1x haters rubbing your hands with glee, I was riding with a chap later in the event who was on a 2x GRX equipped bike and experienced chain suck. And chain suck happens when you shift from the small ring at the front to a big ring, but the chain is stuck to that small chain ring and wraps around and gets jammed, and he had to stop to unjam the bike and then carry on. So mechanicals can happen with 1x and 2x, but in my experience it's fairly rare indeed. So the speed of the bike clearly impressed me. It didn't hold me back at all. But what also amazed me was the comfort, because I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting the comfort of this race bike to be that good, and I wasn't expecting to come away with a bad back. But my back was fine, my neck was good, and I had no issues really, apart from the usual sores, aches and pains you expect from being in the saddle for 9 hours, which is not something I do that often. And my hesitation about the comfort of this bike is born from experience with other gravel race bikes I have tested over the last few years. And the 3T Explorer Race Max and the Villiers Rave SLR spring to mind are two very fast aero gravel bikes, but really fail when it comes to comfort in my experience. I do ask a lot for a bike like this. I want it to be fast, of course, but I want good comfort as well. It's far smoother than I was giving it a chance to be. We have, of course, a 27.2mm seat post with a fair amount exposed, the drop rear stays, and clearly done their work with a carbon fibre layup at the back of the frame to offer a reasonable amount of compliance and comfort. But I should add, it's not as smooth as a giant Revolt. Cannondale Topstone carbon and the Specialized S-Works Crux, but closer to those three bikes and further away from the Villiers and the 3T in my experience. And that despite riding a fairly narrow 40mm tyre when there is space in the frame, remember, for up to a 50mm tyre. So I want to try a 45 and see how that feels and compares to the tyres I have on it right now. You can build an Enve MOG however you like it with any group set you want. I've gone for a Shimano GRX 1x11 group set, electronic shifting, really good hydraulic disc brakes. Apart from that drop chain I mentioned earlier, the group set was flawless. Nice wide range. There were a few climbs when I wish I had a 44 on the back, like the SRAM Explore, but most of the time the 42 was okay. And on some of the faster descents, I was spinning out the 4211, but I used that as a chance to recover and just tuck and go aero. It's a very nice build in this bike, it has to be said, with the Enve SES 3.4 wheels. Nice shallow section, nice in the occasionally blustery conditions we had, and the wheels, I have to say, are amazingly tough. There were a few sketchy descents where I smashed the front wheel into the ground and into rocks, the sort of impact where your arms and your neck hurt from the sudden impact force. But amazingly, despite smashing the rim and the tyre into the rocks, had no punctures and no broken rims or broken spokes. So the carbon rims, these Enve wheels, were super tough, and I had no issues really, despite giving them an absolute hammering. So really impressive performance indeed. So the bike will take up to a 50mm wide tyre, giving you loads of options to go as wide or as narrow as you want. I've gone for these Schwalbe G1R tyres in a 40mm width, 40 because of my go-to preference. It was my first experience on these tyres, and I was a bit nervous that they would be too narrow for comfort and a bit too fast rolling for puncture prevention, but they were fine. I had no punctures, no loss of air, and the grip and the speed from the tyres was very impressive indeed. So fast rolling on the tarmac and the smoother gravel and enough grip in the looser sections as well. And so far they seem to be really durable and tough with no cuts or marks at all on the sidewall or along the tread. Doing the event again, I would probably go to a 45 just for a bit more comfort, because it was quite rough in places, and I think the 40 was the narrowest I want to go on such a course and such a bike. Tyre pressure, if you're interested, was 30 at the back and 25 at the front. Probably a bit higher than I would normally go, but just a bit higher for the peace of mind on such a long event. How you set up a bike for a long distance gravel event is a very interesting question indeed, and one I did fret about quite a bit in the days leading up to the event itself. And as you can see, I went for a very minimal approach indeed. So let me talk you through what I've done. Now, a cool feature of this bike is the down tube storage compartment. There are two neoprene bags in there, and I put a spare tube, gas canisters, and some dyno plugs and other bits and bobs. But I doubled up with a saddle bag with another spare tube, more gas canisters and tyre levers, just to make sure I had everything I needed on this long ride. And then in a tip I borrowed from the Gravel Pros is a dyno plug taped to the back of my seat post with some tape. And if I get a puncture, I can quickly whip it off, stab the tyre and carry on with minimal, fingers crossed, air loss. So didn't have to use it, but a nice little hack there, and quite a good tip if you are trying to ride these events fast or you are racing. So that's all my essentials and spares. And then on the handlebar, I've been testing the Garmin Edge 840, and the battery life of that was very impressive for the 9 hours I was riding. But I did find the navigation quite tricky at times, and following the line on the map can sometimes be a bit vague and not as clear as the chevrons you get on a Wahoo mapping setup. So good and bad. And then underneath on the K-Edge out front mount, which is very stable, it has to be said, a GoPro Hero 9 for recording the action. Really nice Enve bar tape, really comfy, enough cushioning as well. The GRX hood's a bit aggressive. I did have sore hands, so some mitts would have been good for that ride. Two Enve bottle cages, really secure. Had no problems with bottle retention from those. And because there were only 3 feed stations, I think there should have been 5 personally, I had 2 big 750 water bottles to keep me hydrated on what turned out to be one of the hottest days of the year so far. Pedals were the Shimano XT SPD pedals. I've always used Shimano SPD since I was a teenager, and I just like the way they work, and these strike a nice balance of price and weight and value for money. The only thing I would change if I was doing it again would be the Cervelo Italia SLR saddle, which isn't my personal favourite. I've mentioned that before. It was okay, but I wasn't as comfortable as I would have been on a narrow saddle. So that's something I would change again. But apart from that, the bike was fine. And the weight of the bike, as you see it, with computers, GoPro, saddlebag and pedals, it's a very impressive 9.26 kilograms. So pretty light for a fully loaded, ready to ride bike. So I really enjoyed riding the MOG at this new gravel event, and it really looked after me, and I was impressed with the speed, the handling and the comfort. And I think it compares well to other bikes in this category, of which there are quite a few choices. But how does it compare to a Specialized S-Works Crux, which is similar money? There are some obvious similarities, but also some big differences as well. The MOG is designed to be fast and aero, while the Crux is designed to be as light as possible. So the Crux has a 725 gram frame versus 950 grams for this frame. This frame also has mudguard mounts, extra mounts for bottles and bags, and on the fork as well, where the Crux has none of that. Stripped back, there are no bike packing options at all. This also has bigger tyre clearance, 50 versus 47 on the Crux, and we have down tube storage on this bike and full internal cable routing, where it's external on the Crux. The Crux also looks more traditional with the round tubes, whereas this is very modern and contemporary with the aero profiles and the drop rear stays. There are some similarities in how they both ride. I mean, they're both amazing bikes to ride, fantastic performance, but there are some small differences. So the MOG has a higher front end, a slacker head angle, a longer wheelbase and a lower bottom bracket, and does feel more like a road bike in some cases than the Crux. The Crux has a longer trail, so the steering is a bit calmer, but the steering on this bike was actually very calm as well. I'm very impressed with how kind of laid back it felt. It never felt skittish or nervous, whether on the gravel, road sections, or in the woods on the single track where the bike really shone. So the handling of the bike is something I really enjoyed about it. When going from gravel to road, it felt right at home, and a really nice balance of numbers and angles I think worked well for the type of riding this bike is designed for. The bike also drew lots of admiring glances and interest from other people riding the course. I think the understated looks is appealing. Got the MOG logo on the down tube, which grabs your attention if you're riding alongside a person on a MOG. And it is a nice gravel colorway as well, and looks good when covered in dust and dirt as it is right now. I love how a bike looks when it's covered in dust, and it's too nice to wash it off. Better than being covered in mud. Yeah, it shows it's been used, abused and treated well as it should be. This is a brand new Giant Revolt X, and it has suspension at the front and at the back. So does the new Revolt X have the X factor? We'll find out, go through all the details, talk about the price, specification, and even better, go for a first ride here in my local woods and see how it performs. So I'm David, you're watching Just Ride Bikes. Let's dive in. This brand new bike is an addition to the current lineup of Revolt gravel and adventure bikes, which have been around for about 10 years. I've reviewed several over the last few years here at Just Ride Bikes, and very good bikes they are indeed, and very popular too. The X is an addition to that range with extra capacity and capability for the rider who likes to flirt that thin line between gravel and mountain bike, which is me to a T. I love pushing your bikes to their and my limits on trails where a mountain bike might be the better choice, but you still have a bunch of fun on a bike like this. So we have a totally redesigned frame available in carbon or aluminium, all optimized around that suspension fork. The main change is the head tube, much shorter than a normal Revolt. The head tube angle and the seat tube angle are 71 at the front and 73 at the back. And the bottom bracket has actually been lowered over a normal Revolt, and the chainstays are actually a bit shorter. And there are a few features borrowed from the normal Revolt, namely the flip chips in the rear drop out to adjust the wheelbase for shorter or longer to change the handling and also the tire clearance. As well as that suspension fork up front, we also have a dropper seat post, but one with a very clever trick up its sleeve. So it offers between 75 and 100 mil of drop from a handlebar mounted lever, but the clever trick, you have about 25 millimeters of suspension action. Most dropper seat posts really compromise comfort because there's no suspension and there's no flex like a carbon seat post. So dual purpose dropper suspension seat post. You can swap out this seat post for a regular round 30.9 seat post, or the company's own D-Fuse D-shaped seat post if you want a maximum comfort. And the other change, as well as the geometry, are the shorter stems and the wider handlebars fitted to the Revolt X compared to the regular Revolt. The new bike will be offered in 4 builds, and I put all the prices down below in the description. But the range starts here in the UK at £3,000. The model I have here is a Pro 1 with a SRAM Rival 1x setup and an Eagle GX rear mech and a massive dinner plate 1052 cassette, and it retails here in the UK for £5,500 or $6,200 if you're watching in the US. This is a size ML. I'm 181 centimeters tall and that's my size in Giant lineup. And on the scales, without these pedals fitted, it weighs 10 kilos, which is quite heavy on paper. But as I found when I rode it just now, it doesn't ride heavy at all. And in fact, rides like a bike that feels it should be half the weight, which is probably in part thanks to their own super lightweight and super wide carbon fiber wheels with some really nice tires, a cross cut, not seen these before, 45mm wide, nice chunky tread pattern. So thankfully we don't have a slick tire like you get on the normal Revolt. And personally speaking, and let me know if you agree or disagree, I think it's a fabulous looking bike. I love the minimal graphics on this and the two-tone paint job. And I like the combination of colors as well. I think it looks really cool. They matched the fork to the front half of the frame and added a bit of bling out back. Giant still aren't as sexy or perceived to be as desirable as a Specialized or a Trek or a Cannondale, but I think with this bike, that might change. Right, let's get out in the woods and see what the bike is all about. As most of you will know, I'm a big fan of the Revolt platform. Great performance, saves money, just works. I'm also a big fan of the RockShox Rudy suspension fork. Reviewed it last year or year before. So two things combined, the Revolt and the Rudy suspension fork should be a match made in heaven. And so far, that does seem to be the case. So very quick, the first ride today in my local woods, out of my trail dog, Ali. Don't have enough time for anything more adventurous or long distance. So stay tuned to the channel for more. Riding bikes with dogs is ace, with the exception they're too damn fit and fast and make you feel really slow and unfit. Oh, I'm out of breath already. And so far, it doesn't feel like the sprightliness and the performance and the speed of the normal Revolt has been compromised with the direction the X has taken it in. The SRAM gearing with that massive 1052 dinner plate on the back means steep climbs are easy. You don't need a motor with the gearing setup, that's for sure. And because if you're riding the sort of trails where suspension fork is kind of needed, you're probably going to need that gearing to get you back up the other side. The two things go hand in hand. Massive gearing, super low gears, and the suspension and dropper seat post. Got that great geometry, the suspension fork and the suspension seat post smoothing out the bumps from the tree roots which are hidden by the leaves and riding right now. to make a gravel bike that's smoother than a rigid setup, smoother than a normal Revolt. So the comfort, it ticks that box. But comfort, it's only one half of the story. I like pushing these bikes to their limits, and my limits. And this bike so far is giving me a bigger kind of bandwidth to do precisely that. Cool. There she goes. I know a lot of people will be saying, as they always say, just buy a mountain bike. But I love riding a gravel bike on a wide variety of trails, from road to smooth gravel and then deep in the woods like I am now. And a bike that does all that so well. And maybe it's not as good in each discipline as a road, a gravel race bike, and then a mountain bike. It does each to a very high level indeed, and means you can have one bike that's gonna shine in every situation. And when you are exploring trails like I am today, you have a bike that lets you have more fun and go faster. And who doesn't love going faster? Suspension has been well proven on mountain bikes over the last 2 or 3 decades, and guess what? It works here. But I know it won't be for everybody, and that's why the normal Revolt, for lots of people, is probably a smarter choice. Okay, just some quick thoughts based on, admittedly, a very short ride on this new bike. I will be riding it a lot more over coming weeks and months, so stay tuned for more content and more ride impressions on this brand new bike. Firstly, I think it's a big improvement for the riding I do on a gravel bike like this. The addition of that suspension fork, the suspension seat post and dropper seat post, big chunky tyres, that wide range SRAM gearing, and the modified tweaked geometry means the bike that doesn't hold you back in most situations. But I have noticed the seat post clunking, I guess, as it's topping out and then hitting the stops. And that's happened a few times on this short first ride. So that's something I'll keep a close eye on over the next few weeks and months, and whether it's a problem or whether it's just teething issues with a brand new component. But that aside, the rest of the kit is top drawer, as you'd expect on a top end model like this. Super lightweight carbon fiber wheels, they spin up really quickly, nice chunky tyres, so loads of grip in what are quite dry conditions today. Nice wide flared handlebar, nice short stem, nice grippy tactile bar tape as well. I love the wide range SRAM gearing with a battery protector on there as well, so a real neat feature that is. And I think it looks good as well. I like a two-tone paint job. I'm a sucker for a two-tone paint job, and I like the colour of the bike. Very understated graphics for sure. But let me know what you think down below. This is a brand new 3T Extrema Italia, the latest bike from the company that way back in 2016 pioneered the whole concept of aero gravel with the original and now iconic Exploro. So this bike has been brought bang up to date with a host of changes, which in this video I'll talk you around, and of course go for a ride to see how it performs and handles. I've had the bike for a week, so very much a first ride impression. There will be a full review coming soon to the channel. Now, when that original Exploro launched way back in 2016, people laughed at the idea of aerodynamics making any difference on a gravel bike. Well, who's laughing now? We are seeing races like Unbound being ridden at insane speed, 20 miles per hour average for 200 miles, which blows my mind. And now a massive choice of aero gravel bikes. So 3T was definitely ahead of the time with that original Exploro. And the bike has changed a lot over the years, and that change has been led mostly by ever wider tyres. That's been the big change in the whole gravel category. And these, as you can see, are mountain bike tyres. So the current flagship bike in the company's range, taking over from the Exploro, is the Race Max, which I reviewed when it launched 2 years ago. And where that tops out at a 46mm wide tyre, this new bike goes up to a whopping 57mm, which is wider than nearly all other gravel bikes in the category, as I'll show you later in the video. And it really shows a change in the gravel scene, with riders wanting to run bigger tyres than ever before. I think with this bike we might be reaching the limit, because any wider, and you probably do want a mountain bike. This new bike is dominated by the massive down tube. It really is gigantic and gives a very distinctive look to the bike. It's all about maximising aerodynamic performance with the bigger tyres and minimising drag where possible. And while it does look very similar to the current Race Max launched a couple of years ago, apparently, according to 3T, the only thing this bike shares in common is the carbon fibre construction, which is now in Italy. Yes, that's right. For the last 5 years or so, the Italian company has been investing in manufacturing carbon fibre in-house. And that's a really nice thing to hear. I think it's a good thing for companies like 3T to bring manufacturing back in-house, to have more control and have that real USP of purchase over other brands. Now hopefully you might see other brands follow in the footsteps of 3T. So the frame is dominated by this massive down tube, which is narrow around the head tube and then widens around the bottle cages to try and massage air around the bottles and the rear tyre to make it a faster, less draggy bike. 3T doesn't offer any aerodynamic data on how the bike performs in a wind tunnel or compared to its predecessor, so I have to take the word for it that it is a fast bike and the aerodynamics is actually real and not just there for show. Then up front we have a very narrow head tube and a brand new fork that's very slender with a super low profile crown and some other key features I'll touch on in a moment. And then I'm so glad that 3T have got rid of the ugly cable routing on the old bikes, where it went over the stem and into the top tube. It's a feature I never really liked. Yes, they may have had the reasons for why they did it, but I'm glad they now have a more conventional internal cable routing system. Well, I say cables, actually no cables because it's SRAM wireless, but at brake hoses you can just see underneath the stem and then into the frame via the headset bearing. So much more in common with how other manufacturers are doing it. We had their own carbon fibre aero gravel handlebar and their own stem as well, two-piece, so you can customise the fit in terms of stem length and handlebar width as you need, and there are a few spaces to adjust the stack height on the bike too. Moving to the back of the frame, and here it's been built to offer more compliance and more comfort than the Race Max. So firstly we have a round seat post, so you can fit a 27.2mm carbon seat post, suspension seat post, or a dropper seat post for more extreme terrain as I have here, with an internal seat clamp there. And the whole seat tube layout has been optimised to offer a bit more comfort where possible. The stiffness from the head tube and the bottom bracket, which incorporates a thread fit system, is the same as the Race Max, so the same torsional stiffness when you're sprinting and throwing the bike through the corners, but more compliance from the seat tube and the rear stays than that bike. Now let's talk tyre clearance, because that's one of the big drivers behind this new bike and the changes present on it. Now if you want to tackle tough terrain and have some decent comfort, you need bigger tyres. And 3T says the brief behind the bike was to deliver the traction of a mountain bike with the fit of a road bike. And to illustrate the evolution of gravel bike tyre size over the last few years, back in 2016, when the Explorer came out, a 35 to 38 was considered wide. But now here we are in 2023 with a bike that takes up to a 57mm wide tyre. And there's probably even space for a wider tyre if you are happy to compromise clearance, because 3T says there is 6mm of clearance between the rubber and the frame and fork. Now to put that tyre clearance in context against some rivals, a Specialized Diverge goes up to 47, a Canyon Grizzle goes up to 50, my Fairlight Sacan goes up to 50 as well, I think, off the top of my head, and then a Giant Revolt is up to 53. So you can see, compared to those rivals, the 3T Extrema Italia definitely boasts massive tyre clearance. And when talking about tyre clearance, it's a slightly tricky topic sometimes, because what the tyre width says on the sidewall isn't always actually a tyre width you get when fitted to different rims. So a few years ago, 3T developed a really clever smart system called WAM and RAM, which is basically the actual width and diameter of a tyre when fitted to a rim. The idea is to make it easier for us consumers and for designers to specify a tyre and not have any issues where you might fit a tyre that should fit, but due to the rim width doesn't actually fit. And it's a really sensible system, but it really hasn't caught on in the way I thought and hoped it would do when they introduced it a few years ago. And that's because it's definitely one of the more sensible ideas the bike industry has given us in recent years. Right, let's talk equipment and what this new bike will cost you to buy if you like the look of it. And then we'll go for a ride and see how it performs and handles. Now, it's worth remembering that the frame is made in Italy, which will mean a higher cost than a frame made in the Far East, so bear that in mind with the prices. There are 3 builds to choose from, of which this is the most affordable, the cheapest option, and it retails for £6,700. And as you can see, we have a SRAM rival front end, so shifters and single chainring at the front, and a brand new Eagle transmission GX level rear mech and a massive 1052 cassette, what SRAM likes to call a mullet setup. Party at the back and business at the front. And what that actually means is a massive range of gears getting up the steepest, most extreme climbs you might find when riding this bike. And the rear mech hides the battery really neatly inside the mechanism, so it's well protected from damage. So I really like that. It's not exposed on the back of the rear mech at all. Then we have a pair of Zip 303S carbon wheels, Continental Race King mountain bike tyres, and then a wireless RockShox Reverb dropper seat post and a Cell San Marco saddle. And all that equipment on this frame with no pedals weighs 9.6 kilograms. You can also buy the frame on its own and build up any parts you want yourself, and that retails for £4,600. So now you know everything there is to know about the new Extrema Italia. Let me tell you how it rides. And the bike arrived last week, so I've had a few days to ride it and really get to know the bike fairly well on some local trails and over in the Forest of Dean, where I like to go for a day's gravel exploring and adventuring. There will be a more in-depth review in the future, so just first impressions give you a taste of what the bike is like to ride. Speed is clearly still everything with the new bike, but it now comes with a lot more grip from the fat mountain bike tyres, which is handy given how muddy the trails are at the time of testing the bike. The bigger tyres really suit the bike well and remove the limitations of narrow gravel tyres for exploring forest tracks and more demanding single track trails like I'm riding here. One area of disappointment with the Race Max was comfort. The new bike is a big improvement. It offers a far higher level of smoothness and comfort on rough trails, and more composed when skidding and sliding over rocks and roots. But that said, I don't think the smoothest gravel bike in the world. The Giant Revolt, Billet Adler and Specialized Diverge would definitely give it a run for its money when it comes to outright comfort. The fit is a bit higher, shorter and more relaxed than a Race Max, still racy but not quite as extreme, and comfort on the long rides I did was very good. The geometry still provides a lively and reactive experience on the trail. 3T hasn't given the bike the full mountain bike makeover, stopping short of making it as slack as outliers like the BMC Urz or Merida Silex. This shows on very steep and technical sections where its composure is less convincing than the rival bikes, but generally it does manage to hold it all together when you're fighting for grip and control. I'm perhaps a little bit disappointed the geometry isn't more suited to extreme riding the bike is claimed to be designed for. The head angle is in the middle of the road at 71.5 degrees, the same as the Canyon Grail, but not as slack as more progressive bikes like the Merida Silex or BMC Urz, which are in a 69-degree ballpark. So I do feel 3T could have been bolder with the geometry to really take the capability of the bike to another level. Clearly the new 3T Extrema Italia is still a speed-focused bike at heart, but one that now won't hold you back or beat you up when the trail becomes extreme. So yes, the bike does live up to its name. Now a few notes on the equipment choices so far. I've ridden the Eagle transmission on a few mountain bikes. This is my first experience on a gravel bike, and it works in an interesting way. The rear mech waits for the cassette to be at a certain rotation before the chain moves across to give more reliable shifting under load. Where on a mountain bike it's a bit slow, on this bike it's really fast and slick, probably because of high speeds and high cadence involved on a bike like this. So shifting in the mud has been excellent, doesn't miss a beat at all. It's super quiet and super reliable. I've had no issues with it at all, and the range is fantastic when you are graveling up some very, very steep climbs. 3T's own aero gravel handlebar is a really satisfying shape. It's aero on the tops, does make fitting a computer mount a bit more tricky because not much round diameter to fit the clamp onto. A nice shape when you're cruising along on the tops. And then the drops are flared while the hoods are relatively upright. And when you're in the drops riding over rough terrain, there's quite a bit of noticeable compliance for handlebars moving around. So a bit of extra comfort when you are riding in the drops. And then we have the reverb dropper seat post, which is activated by pressing both buttons together to drop the seat post, and gives a useful amount of extra clearance when you are navigating very steep, tricky terrain where saddle can be kind of really jarring you in the backside, and that helps you get down onto descents a bit more easily. And then the use of mountain bike tyres is a no-brainer when riding in mud, and give way more traction and way more control than any of the best gravel tyres I have tried. It's not just the extra width of the tyre, but the actual tread pattern as well. Enough depth between the blocks and the angular shape that gives excellent traction when accelerating, braking and cornering. Not my first experience of mountain bike tyres on a gravel bike. I put some on my Fairlight Sacan last year and it worked really well. And of course I rode the 3T Ultra last year with smaller 650B wheels and tyres, and that worked well too. So clearly, based on my riding, this new Extrema Italia is a bike that lives up to its name. It's an extremely fast bike and a bike that's more at home on extreme terrain than the Race Max I reviewed 2 years ago. This is a brand new Merida Silex gravel bike. Now, some of you may be aware of this bike. It launched just a few weeks ago after winning or being ridden to success in the Gravel World Champs. But the thing is, it's not actually designed to be a gravel race bike. When you look at the geometry and all the key features, it's clearly a gravel adventure bike packing setup, along similar lines to the BMC Urs or the FiftyOne Assassin. But clearly it can be raced. It's a carbon frame, it's lightweight. So I'm really keen to find out where it fits in the gravel category and how it compares to other bikes I have ridden over the last couple of years. The main reason I'm saying it's not really a race bike is because of the geometry, particularly the head angle. This is 69.5 degrees, which is way slacker than the more typical 71 or 72 you find on something like the Canyon Grail or a Specialized Crux, and it's a number you might find on a short travel mountain bike, and it's 1.5 degrees slacker than the old bike, which is already quite slack. Thankfully, the head tube is much shorter than the original. That bike, when launched back in 2018, when gravel was fairly new, was very distinctive, shall we say, by virtue of having a very tall head tube, and there were quite a few unkind comments about it. But the general idea, the principle, was fairly sound to place the front of the bike in a high position to make it more accessible and more capable when riding very steep mountain bike type trails. So not a head down super aero setup at all. But we now have a longer fork, so the head tube can be shorter, and it makes the whole bike, I think, and you let me know in the comments below, look a lot more pleasant to the eye. That longer fork also means the bike is compatible with a suspension fork without ruining the geometry as well. And I can see a bike with a suspension fork and a dropper seat post for that really gnarly type of gravel that some people like to do with their bikes, really pushing the boundaries of what is possible on a drop bar bike. One of the big changes from the original launch back in 2018 is tyre clearance, and we have come a long way in that regard. So we've gone from 38 on the old bike to 45 on this new bike, and the bikes come spec'd with a 45mm wide tyre, as we have here, a Maxxis Rambler, which I've not ridden for a long time. There is loads of space around the tyre and the rear stays and the fork I can see from here, so good for mud at the time of year here in the UK, but it's a shame they didn't go wider. 47 or 50 might have future-proofed the bike a bit better, and when the Specialized Diverge is a 47 and the Fairlight Sacan goes up to 50 plus, 45 does seem a bit of a limitation, but let me know your thoughts on that topic down below. Is 45 wide enough, or should they have gone wider? Some other details worth pointing out: we have internal routing, so the brake hoses and the gear cables, because this bike's mechanical, go through the top cap into the frame. We have a normal two-piece handlebar and stem, so you can swap the handlebar and stem if you need for fit reasons or other personal preferences, but the cables and the hoses do go through that top headset bearing, which is a potential issue. And you see my video on the pros and cons of internal routing by watching the video linked up above and down below in the description. One benefit of the cables being routed inside the frame is we have lots of space here for fitting a small bar bag or a big handlebar bag if you are going bike packing, because in my experience the cables here can get in the way when you do fit a big bag, so that is one upside. Up front we also have lots of fork mounts for a cage or extra bottles. We've got mud guard mounts as well, and then if I flip the bike around we have a really interesting detail down here, something I've not seen on a gravel bike before. Firstly, we have bigger disc brake rotors than we normally get, 180mm front and rear, which really shows the mountain bike influence on the bike. Normally on a road or gravel bike we have 160 front and rear, or 160 front and 140 rear. Now the idea of bigger disc brake rotors is to give more power and more stopping ability, and on a mountain bike that makes a lot of sense, but I'm not sure if it's really needed on a bike like this. I can't recall many moments on a gravel bike of wishing I had more braking power, more stopping force. But maybe you feel differently, maybe your disc brake rotors have been holding you back. Let me know by leaving a comment down below. The second detail are these things here, which are heat sinks on the brake calipers front and rear. They're attached to the mount between the frame, the fork and the disc brake caliper, and sit just shy of the carbon. Don't actually touch the carbon here. And the idea, well, you know how a heatsink works, draw heat away from that source to keep that component cooler. But how much difference this actually makes on a gravel bike at the slow speeds I'm riding bikes at remains to be seen. But a cool little detail, something Merida have done on their bikes in the past, but whether it's needed here, I don't know. Again, let me know your thoughts on that. They do look kind of funky, but I guess testing will find out whether they're actually worth it. Another detail, while the bike is this side facing you, is a threaded bottom bracket, so no press fit to worry about here. So a bike that really does tick a lot of boxes for the adventure, bike packing, mountain bike inspired gravel bike. Merida is of course a brand well known for offering good value for money, right up there with Giant and offering a lot of equipment for your cash. The range includes carbon fibre and aluminium frame options, and prices start from just over £1,200, which is pretty accessible for this type of bike, and definitely pushes it into that sort of commuting hybrid category as well, and goes right up to £9,000 for the 10,000 model. This is a 7,000, so we have a carbon frame and a Shimano GRX 12-speed mechanical disc brake group set, and some nice Eastern wheels, which I don't often see on a gravel bike, and their own flared drop handlebar, stem, carbon seat post and their saddle. Okay, last check before I get changed and we go for a spin and give my first impressions. There will be a full review coming very soon, so make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see that. Is to weigh it. So I've got my scales here, reset on a top tube, lift up, wait for the beep. 9.4 kilograms. I'll bring that to the camera so you can see that. That is pretty decent, I think, for a bike of this size, frame, material and specification. So let's go see how it performs. Straight away, this bike feels unusual is a word. Coming from more road biased focused gravel bikes like the Grail and others in recent weeks, this bike feels very odd. We have quite a high front end, short stem and a wide handlebar, so the whole front of the bike is much higher and closer to you than you would expect on a kind of fast race gravel bike. But when you point the bike downhill, as I have been doing here in the Forest of Dean on some mountain bike trails, it all makes sense. That quirkiness and the fit just makes the bike descend so well. That slacker head angle and the extra length in it just creates such a calmness and a real authority when you are pushing it through corners and down rocky, steppy trails where most road focused gravel bikes can be a bit jittery, but on this your weight is kind of higher and further back behind the front wheel, the front axle, and it just gives you much more scope to put the bike where you want it. The bike can chuck the belt offline, doesn't feel skittish or nervous, just feels really at home. And that's where the geometry of the bike and the numbers, the angles all make a lot of sense. So for that adventurous riding where you might encounter some very rough trails, which you might do on a long distance bikepacking trip, like the Badger Divide I did in Scotland last year, is one that comes to mind. So it definitely takes a little while to get used to it if you're coming from a road bike or a racer gravel bike. If you're coming from a mountain bike, it might feel more familiar. But after a few miles, once you've done some quite technical trails, that quirkiness fades away and it just feels really good and you feel right at home on the bike. Got some nice chunky tyres, these Maxxis Rambler tyres give good grip, running super low pressures, 20-25 psi for my body weight today. Comfort is pretty good. I mean, the only time it feels a bit rough is when you are carrying a lot of speed down a fast technical trail with rock slabs and you sort of wish you had a bit of suspension. But that's when you really find the limits, not the limits so much, but really pushing the bike as far as you can, because you can push it a lot further and harder and faster than a typical racy gravel bike. The gear shifting seems to work just fine despite the internal routing. Trying GRX 12 speed, of course, big range cassette helping me in the climbs. I've managed to get up the climbs just fine, and the sub 10 kilo weight isn't holding me back, doesn't feel heavy on the climbs at all. Just feels a really good bike for exploring anything beyond smooth gravel into that sort of grey area where a mountain bike might be the better choice. This bike really makes a lot of sense, and it definitely reminds me of the BMC Urs and the FiftyOne Assassin, two are really laid back, slack angled gravel bikes. So I've done a bit of descending today and I've been using the brakes quite a bit, and we've got 180 rotors front to rear, remember. I'm not really sure, I can feel a bit more power, but I'm not sure it's like a night and day difference to 160s that I normally run. But maybe on a longer sustained descent where you are dragging the brakes a lot more, that's where they make more sense, rather than a quite short descent today where it's a very short period of braking between the corners. So I'm not really sure I can feel the benefits of it today, and the heat sinks, I haven't got much heat to suck away from calipers today. Wouldn't say it's the smoothest bike I've ever ridden, despite the 45mm wide tyres. Quite a rough trail I'm riding on right now, so it's a little bit jarring. But one nice detail on this bike, well, two details, are the fact we have a normal stem and seat post, so you could, if you wanted to, fit a suspension stem and seat post and really max out the comfort on this bike with the wide tyres, and that'd be an awesome setup for some big distance bike packing, adventure riding. I mean, who needs a mountain bike when you have a bike like this? So first impressions, which this first ride is, a more in-depth review will be in the pipeline in the next few weeks' time. They're very good. It does ride very well. If you want a bike that can take on more rugged, technical, demanding trails, definitely a bike for adventure, bike packing, just a really capable bike when you are anywhere far from a smooth gravel track. And the option to fit suspension stem, seat posts, whack on loads of bags and bottles and really go wherever you want does make it a very appealing option. This is a Cannondale Topstone Lab 71, the US company's flagship top of the range gravel bike. So Lab 71 is a new attempt by the US company to offer a really high-end version of each bike in its range. So we're talking better paint finishes and higher grades of carbon fiber for a lower weight, and of course a higher price tag as well. They've done a Super 6 Evo race bike, there's a Scalpel mountain bike, and a Topstone gravel bike as well. But is it worth paying extra for a bike like this over the regular bikes in the company's range? By the end of the video, we'll know the answer to that question. In the case of the Topstone here, the Lab 71 version is lighter than a regular carbon version by a claimed 160 grams, thanks to a higher grade of carbon in the manufacturing process, and also a new paint finish. We have this rather spectacular ox blood on the back of the frame, but then for some reason they run out of money or paint, and the rest of the frame, the front half and the fork, is this naked bare carbon fiber, which is a real shame. That probably saved weight, but this paint finish over the entire frame and fork I think will look much better than the half and half we have here. But let me know what you think down below. Would this half and half put you off buying the bike? I think it might me, but that's my personal opinion. So let's move on to the main details of the frame that you need to know about if you're considering a gravel bike and a Topstone is on your shortlist. Firstly, we have tyre clearance for up to a 45mm tyre on a 700cc wheel. You can run 650B if you prefer. They offer complete builds in their catalogue with those smaller wheels if you want them. But we are seeing 700 become the real default option in the gravel bike market, and a 40 or 45 is a really good choice for gravel, kind of mixed terrain riding and road riding as well. I'm sure you love the fact we have a threaded bottom bracket down below, so no press fit issues to worry about. There are mounts all over the frame and fork for extra bottles and bags, so great for bike packing. I used another version of the Topstone last year for a Trans-Cambrian Welsh gravel adventure, and with loads of bags and extra bottles it worked really well. There are mudguard or fender mounts as well. I haven't tried putting them on myself, but we have mounts on the back of the frame as you can see. And a kind of hangover, if that's the right word, from the Synapse launch with the Smart Sense, the integrated lights and battery and radar on that bike. We have that system compatibility on this bike, but they're not forcing you to buy it. They have the mount on the down tube for it if you want to upgrade, but if you don't, we have this mount with the addition of some straps so you can fit a bag or inner tube or something there, which is kind of a cool feature, but not quite as cool as the down tube storage you get on a Specialized Diverge, for example. And there's quite a big down tube, so there is space inside for storage. So this system seems a bit of a halfway house between that, let's be honest, failed Smart Sense rollout on a Synapse and a Topstone, and this doesn't really work as well as intended. So that's a bit of a disappointment, and hopefully it's something we might see disappear or be better utilised in the future. And then of course the main feature, the big selling point on the Topstone is this, what they call Kingpin. It's a through axle pivot during the seat stays to the seat tube, and that in conjunction with the shape and the layout of carbon fibre around the top tube, the seat post, the seat tube here, and the flattened chain stays allows the whole back end to flex a lot more, and they claim up to 30mm of deflection in the saddle. And we'll talk more about the Kingpin and its impact on the bike when we come to the ride section later in this video. Now, you don't choose a Lab 71 Topstone if you're on a budget or looking for the best value version of a Topstone, because the frame set, the frame and fork, retails in the UK for £3,000, and you can't buy a complete bike around the Lab 71. It's a frame only package, so you either have to build it yourself if you're a budding home mechanic, as I did with this bike here, or you can get a bike shop or bike mechanic to build it for you. But just give you the scope to build a bike of your dreams with the wheels, tyres and groups that you want, and not be forced into the specification that the manufacturer decides for you. So I built this bike up to test the brand new 12-speed mechanical GRX group set. You can see a full video on my impressions of the group set by watching the video linked up in the card above there somewhere and down below in the description. Long and short of it, it works really well. Mechanical shifting, nice and light, precise, powerful disc brakes, good range from this big cassette we have here, a 1051, so great for climbing up some steep climbs or when you're going bike packing with extra weight on a bike to help you get up those climbs where the weight can really hold you back. I then went for some hologram wheels from Cannondale, their own carbon fibre wheels, high quality DT Swiss internals. then a prime carbon aero handlebar and stem, and a fabric saddle with some carbon rails, and a complete bike weight was 7.7 kilos. So 7.7 does compare really well to other gravel bikes in this sort of space and price and build, and that with a mechanical group set is pretty darn impressive. But the Lab 71 is definitely not the smartest way to buy a Topstone if you are on a budget or looking for the best value for money. On screen now is a Carbon 3, which costs just over £3,000, so only £200 more than its entire frame set. Yes, it's not as light thanks to the carbon fibre differences, but you are getting a complete bike with a Shimano GRX 11-speed 2x group set and some decent WTB wheels and tyres, and you could upgrade a few parts and make it a really nice bike. So is a Topstone a good gravel bike? Well, in short, yes, it does what you want and expect from a gravel bike. It works fantastically on country lanes and roads, and then smooth gravel like I'm riding today. And that Kingpin out back does deliver a bit more comfort in the saddle. Not a night and day change, but you really notice it. It allows you to run narrow tyres, 40mm tyres, and still get good comfort in the saddle. And just a really fast bike. The geometry makes it good on the road and also good on these smooth gravel tracks I'm riding today. Not the most progressive, so it's not at home on steeper, rougher trails like that FiftyOne Assassin or the BMC Ers, but for the sort of riding we're doing nice roads, country lanes and smooth gravel in the woods like today, it's right at home. Really good choice. What I like about the Topstone in particular is the geometry and the fit is quite sporty, quite close to an endurance bike like the company Synapse, and that makes it a good option if you do like to ride gravel as fast as you can. Definitely a good race bike. There isn't much aero to speak of, but the fit and the handlebar definitely bring some aero to the platform. And that similarity or closeness to the endurance bike means it's really good on the road as well. And for the riding I do, I'm often riding on the road, nice quiet country lanes, and then finding bits of gravel, bridleways, byways, forest tracks, and linking it all together. And for that sort of riding, the Topstone works very well. The wheelbase is quite long and the head angle slack and the fork trail quite long as well. So it gives really nice kind of stable handling, really not slow, but slower steering than some gravel bikes. Definitely not twitchy or fast reacting when you are carving through nice sweeping forest tracks. You definitely don't choose a Topstone if you're trying to ride technical or tame mountain bike trails. It's not really that home, the rowdier and rougher and noisier it gets on the trail. The BMC Ers and the FiftyOne Assassin with a slacker, longer geometry, definitely more at home, or any bike with a suspension fork is definitely more at home on those sort of trails. But stick to smoother trails, nice single track flowing through the woods, and a Topstone is adequate for that sort of riding. One of the big reasons for buying or choosing the Topstone is comfort. And we have the Kingpin here, which might seem a gimmick, but it does work. It does deliver a smoother ride than most other gravel bikes in the saddle that I've ridden over the past few years. And comfort in the saddle is a hard thing to measure out in the real world, away from a lab. But based on my experience, it's a smoother ride than something like a giant Revolt, which is a smooth ride thanks to their bendy carbon seat posts. And it's probably, for me, in the same kind of arena as the Canyon Gristle with their VCLS split seat posts. That works really well on that bike, but I think this system does have the edge. The Topstone just has the edge over the Canyon Gristle. There's just a bit more comfort, a bit more compliance from the back end of the bike. And it really does give the benefit of going up to a bigger tyre at low pressures, and means you can run a fairly narrow, by gravel standards, 40mm tyre, but feel like you're on a 45mm tyre at the back with low pressures. That's based on my testing of this bike with different wheels and tyres and other bikes with different wheels and tyres I've ridden over the past few months in parallel with this bike here. So comfort in the saddle is very impressive and does give a nice smooth ride whether you're dealing with potholes on the road or actual gravel and rough terrain. So comfort in the saddle is fantastic, really, really impressive. There's nothing at the front, no sort of Kingpin at the front, but they have worked their magic in the fork and the head tube and stuff to create a bike that doesn't feel unbalanced, doesn't feel disjointed. The front end is definitely firmer than the back, but it's not harsh, and it didn't feel like the front end really jarring my arms over rough ground. But you could, if you wanted maximum comfort, fit a suspension stem like this one here, or one from Redshift, because we have a normal steering tube, so that would plonk on top just fine and give you maximum comfort if the front end is a bit harder than you like compared to what you get at the back end, thanks to the Kingpin. So I've had the bike for the last few months and been riding it a lot, so let me share some likes and dislikes. Well, I love the fact we have a threaded bottom bracket, so no press-fit woes there to worry about. I love the fact we have mounts all over the frame and fork for bike packing duty, so bags, cargo capacity can be increased on the bike very well. I don't mind the cable routing being mostly external, but it does give quite a messy front end, but it does mean you fit any handlebar or stem you want. But on a premium top of the range bike like this, having a integrated front end might be more in suiting with what people would expect from a top end bike like this, at least compared to what other brands are offering in their sort of top of range space for a bike like this. So that's a bit of a thing to point out, but not a deal breaker, depending on your point of view of internal versus external cable routing. One thing I definitely dislike is the sort of redundant smart sense port on the down tube here. Yes, we have this bracket and a strap supplied in the box for putting in an inner tube or bag, but it feels a bit of a leftover, a bit of a carryover from that failed system, and not as nice as the down tube storage you get on a Specialized Diverge, which I think is a really smart solution for a gravel bike. Having all your tools, a spare tube inside a frame, out of the way of mud and stuff, and not hang off the bike is a real nice detail. I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's a real shame we don't have this ox blood marbled finish all over the frame, because this raw naked carbon doesn't feel very premium for me. If I'm paying $3 for a frame set and this is the frame I got, I would be a bit disappointed, to be honest. I don't think it's really doing the heavy lifting it needs to do. So that's definitely a dislike for me. Will it put me off buying a bike? Possibly. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment down below. Now, sadly, my time with the Topstone is coming to an end, and I have to dismantle the bike and send the frame back to Cannondale. But I have enjoyed riding it for the last few weeks and months, as I've enjoyed riding every Topstone in the past. And the bike does deliver everything you want from a gravel bike. Definitely at a sporty end and ideal for combining road sections with smooth, fast gravel. Not the best in technical terrain, as I mentioned earlier, thanks to the geometry, but I like the versatility baked into it, all the mounts and the threaded bottom bracket. But I don't think this frame is really doing the work it needs to do to justify the fairly hefty price tag compared to buying a complete bike for more or less the same price with a group set and wheels fitted. So unless you really want that exclusive Lab 71 weight and finish of this bike, then I think the Carbon 3 that I flagged up earlier, I'll put a link to it down below, is probably a smarter buy. This is a brand new Mason Bokeh gravel bike. An update on the original launch way back in 2016, when gravel was just in its infancy, and a bike which I reviewed at the time. And then we had version 2 in 2019, which I also rode, and now for 2023, we have this, version 3. The new bike looks almost identical to the old one, and that's no bad thing in my opinion, because if the recipe works, don't throw it out. And the company doesn't do model years, so it tweaks and refinements where needed.
The changes are subtle, a modest attempt to keep it fresh, but a testament to how spot on the original was all those years ago. The frame is still handmade in Italy from triple butted aluminium with custom tube shapes everywhere. This colour, called sepia, is brand new and very fetching it is too. New CNC machine dropouts blend seamlessly into the frame, while rear cable and brake hose routing is now internal. There are extra mounts for cargo and water carrying duties, while dynamo routing for front and rear lights now passes through the top tube.
Then up front, we have a brand new carbon fibre fork, which has, as you see, all the mounts for extra racks, cargo capacity, and so on. And with the new fork, tyre clearance has been improved a little bit over the old model. So a 700 by 45 or a 650 by 55. And with these 2.1 inch mountain bike tyres fitted, clearance is ample around the fork, really nice amount of space. Unfortunately, the same can't be said at the back of the frame, because that tyre is very, very close to the chainstays. Although riding through some very muddy conditions, I had no issue with clearance or mud clogging, and there's no chainstay bridge down there, which definitely helps. That is a bit close. And I would be worried if the wheel buckled on a adventure ride and you couldn't quite straighten it, you wouldn't have much leeway for clearance at all. So a bit of a blemish on an otherwise impressive bike. But it is an expensive option. So the frame and fork package will set you back nearly £1,500, and then complete builds start from just over £3,200 with Shimano GRX and go up to over £4,000 with a SRAM Revolt Explore group set. The build I have here with the Campag Ekar group set, Hunt wheels and Vittoria tyres and a Ritchie Venture Max flare drop handlebar is over £3,600. And that is a lot of money for an aluminium bike, it has to be said, and there are of course cheaper options. Now for comparison, for context of that price, a Canyon Grizzle with the same group set is £300 cheaper, and that Canyon Grizzle does ride very well. I have reviewed it in the past and there's a link down below in case you missed it. That Canyon will give a slightly smoother ride though, thanks to the carbon fibre frame doing a better job of soaking up the vibrations and impacts from riding on rough trails and rough roads. And then of course, a party trick is a VCLS split seat post, which gives amazing seated comfort.
You might expect the Bokeh to be heavy compared to the Grizzle, but at 9.3 kilos on my scales, it's actually the same weight. And it compares well to other bikes in a category 2 and lighter than a steel bike like my own Fairlight Cycle Cercan.
For outright performance, comfort, the Canyon is, on paper at least, probably a better choice. But don't write off a Mason just yet. With Mason, you're buying from a small British company. They have a barn down near Brighton. You're going to test ride this bike and meet the people behind the brand, and they do a personal handover if you want it as well. But buying a Canyon is a very different experience. You won't meet anybody from the brand other than a UPS man when it drops off the box the bike comes in. And for some people, I know that will be a factor in choosing which bike they go for. Now, I'll let you into a little secret. When I bought my Fairlight Cycle Cercan steel gravel bike a handful of years ago, the other bike on my 2-bike shortlist was actually a Mason Bokeh. And I ummed and ahed and flip-flopped between the two bikes for quite some time before settling on the Fairlight Cycle Cercan. And after riding this bike, I've been reminded of just how close the two bikes are despite their material differences. I'm happy with the choice I made, but the bike does run it very close. And the difference in material is a really interesting one. There are pros and cons to steel, aluminium and carbon fibre of course, and every person watching has a personal preference and leaning towards a different material over another one. Now personally, I love the way a good aluminium frame rides, and this is a really fine example of how well the material rides when done to a level of craftsmanship we have here. Right, let's see what the bike is all about. And when I last reviewed a Bokeh about 4 years ago, I used words like sporty, fast and agile to describe how it rode. And really with the new version, nothing has changed. And that's no bad thing. It's a really pleasant experience. It's great on the road and it's great off-road too, especially with your fat, chunky mountain bike tyres. My goodness me, is it good when the going gets rough and tough. But in the 4 years since the bike launched, we've seen an explosion of gravel bikes, and they're going in different directions, aero and fast, and at the other end, more progressive, slacker geometry, like the BMC Urs and a FiftyOne Assassin. But despite the changing goalposts of the gravel sector, this new bike still offers that sweet balance of road handling and speed and off-road capability. It's not the most capable when the trail gets really rough and steep and technical and you might be better off on a mountain bike, but to be fair, the company does now offer a steel version of the Bokeh with slacker geometry, a nod towards the increasing capability and desire of people riding bikes to really push them to places where back in 2016 we probably never thought they would be taken. But being taken there, they most definitely are. But I, for one, I'm glad they haven't messed around with the geometry, because for lots of people buying perhaps their first gravel bike or their second gravel bike, the new Bokeh is just the perfect combination of weight, stiffness, handling, ride dynamics, and all the versatility as well. So it's quite satisfying that despite its age, it's still a really competent bike. And still, it's a valid choice in 2023. My goodness me, has it rained this summer? So muddy right now.
To really put the Bokeh through its paces, I embarked on a bikepacking trip across Wales with a couple of pals. We encountered a wide range of trails, from canal towpaths to windswept moorlands to epic rocky mountain descents that would challenge even a mountain bike. The highlight for me was a rocky passage over the gap in the shadow of Penny Fan, which at 886 metres is the highest point in South Wales. This was an extremely tough test of the bike and my riding skills, and while the top section was unrideable due to the wet nature of the trails and the rocks, the Bokeh really impressed. Yes, the geometry doesn't give you the same confidence and capability as a slacker, more progressive geometry bike, but on the smoother trails it's a very reassuring, calm and pleasant experience. The climb up to the gap was tough, and yes, a full suspension mountain bike or a Land Rover would have been a better choice on one particular trail, but it was just 1% of the overall distance we covered in 2 days of riding. And personally, I love a challenge and being underbiked and try and take the wrong bike as far as I possibly can. I don't want it to be too easy. During the ride, we encountered all sorts of trails, and I found the Bokeh to lack the smoothness of a good steel or carbon fibre bike. Aluminium does have a sprightly ride and gives more feedback than carbon or steel, and you could say it has more interaction, and that's something that people really like. It can't be accused of feeling dead or lifeless at all. Thankfully, these fat tyres really helped and made it feel much smoother than it really was, and closed the gap somewhat to a carbon fibre or steel bike.
But this material is still a good choice. Lighter than steel, plenty of stiffness, so on a par with carbon, gives a really snappy, really direct responsiveness. Climbs really well too, thanks to the stiffness of the frame. So a really interesting concoction of all the attributes we look for in a bike like this. Hopefully you found this video useful and interesting. Got any comments, feel free to drop them down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe by hitting that button on screen right now. And if you want to see some more gravel bikes worth your consideration, then watch this video right here. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again very soon.